Hello and welcome back. This is David from the Personal Finance Squad. We just finished with section 3.3 where we had a supplemental account developed for childcare, but within that we mapped out the entire year's dates worth of childcare and also did the exercise that showed us at points where money may fall short of what was owed. Therefore, we established an exercise that would tell us how much money would need to be inputted into that particular expense account so that during the year there would be no shortages in the account to pay for the bill. So what we want to do now in section 3.4 is to continue this exercise, but do this with seasonal bill schedules. Seasonal bill schedules are relating specifically to gas or electricity. Now, depending on where you live and the temperature, and certainly with the global climate change we have these days, it's hard to predict as it's ever been to know what your bills are going to be. However, you still have to predict and come up with past history to help you out with that. So when we talk about huge swings in temperature and the amount of electricity or gas you may use, this applies for those who own or rent a home. If you're in an apartment or a condo, usually those bills stay more flat and predictable. In the colder months, the bills are higher, of course. In the warmer months, they could be lower, but that might depend on where you live because you may have the air conditioning on most of the time if you live in Florida, for example. Whereas in like the Midwest, you may have the air conditioning on a few months. If you live in San Diego, maybe you don't have it on at all. Maybe you live close to the water and have a breeze and you don't use it very much. It just depends on your climate. So again, that's why budgets are all individual to the person who is constructing them. To talk about the mitigation for the swings in the bills, right here. Usually you should be able to go online. Now it's that if they keep records, what we want to say there is you should be able to at least get a year's, if not 2 years or 18 months of bills to start determining past amounts to come up with what it looks like a good number would be for each month of the year. They tell you the usage, they tell you the bill history, and so you can calculate a grid that we see below us here, all of this right here. So what I did here is create this based on a Midwest climate because it's a 4-season climate. So that means you're going to get the general fluctuations between the spring and the summer and of course the fall and the winter. And of course those seasons kind of carry over. Where I am at right now, it's in a Midwest climate, and we're in mid-April, and it is 23 degrees. So you just never know. So we can see right here, I put a little some conditions in here based on the month, and you can see in the December, January, February, March, the bills are higher. So you can see here we call the fall-winter crossover, right? Increased furnace usage. Certainly January, February traditionally is the coldest month. And then now there's the winter-spring crossover, but as like I just said in April, we definitely don't have air conditioning, but we're certainly using regular heat. But conceivably speaking, based on history, no air conditioning in those months. So then you get into the spring-summer crossover, and you may need the air conditioning. Beginning of summer, you certainly start using it. Then you get into August, so the July and August, those are kind of like the big months as they are with February and January for the winter months, right, where you really have the big spikes. September, typically you won't need it. And then now we have fall, we have October, November, and there's a good chance that you won't use the furnace at all, you start getting into it. So again, where you live and where you're at now, you probably have a pretty good idea of what that impact is on a regular basis in terms of when you use the heat and when you don't, or the AC. So what we want to do here is just perform our exercises that we have with the other two examples with bowling and childcare. So we can see that if we add up all of this right here, that the total bill is $600. So just for some numbers here, we see the lower gas periods at $29 for that, and higher periods it was $70.50. So there's a large dichotomy, right? It's a big swing. Your range is very big. But in terms of the actual bill amount, it's not too bad in this case. So that's what we're reflecting right here. But again, the way we budget for a fixed year, so it doesn't matter what month it is. So we take our basic math as usual, and we take the $600 and divide it by 12 and come up with a $50 average amount. So we looked in Jasper's budget, and you don't have it in front of you, but he has $50 as his item. That's what he's charging every month to his budget for himself. So we're going to go through and look at this grid now for the year, which now we know the prediction, and now from the first grid we have the average of the $50. So if we look here, we're starting this in January. This is just the assumption for this particular exercise. And if we go through the history here, you can see that based on cost, you're going to see that for the first 3 months, money has to come from supplemental. And then of course, like in our other exercises, we have also seen supplemental getting money. Here it's a small amount, and here, so usually in a block, right? Now with the other exercise, we had a negative balance. We had an added cash right in here, and we had a couple more columns that said, hey, what is our current balance? So we were tracking when the zeros would happen, when would the negative happen, if it was going to happen, so that we could determine through the year how much it would cost. Now, you can make that column and then decide if you need to fill it out. Because as we look in this particular case, the math is really simple. We don't really need the current balance column, because if we look right here, we know that this amount comes out to $104. We already know we're in the hole right off the bat. And you can see if we add up all of this over here, it's not going to come to $104. It looks like we have $54.76 here. And then we have the 3, and then we have the 48 and 53 here. So the whole point is, this happened to be very fortunate that it's just a lucky exercise that we don't have to go through all of this math. We know right up front that we need 104. We can see that the total amount it's going to require for the year is 129. So if we go down here a little bit, we have the added cash analysis. So right up front, we stick in this $104. And then the first month, as we already know, we're already taking money from that, which leaves the 73, and then we take here 31, and then we end up at 0. So this is exactly what we predicted. And then as we get into the 2 sub column, that $76 is right there. We can see that goes down to 73, and then of course we start putting money back in because these months the bills are under the predicted 50. So you can see this number build, right? And then the last month we fall short in December, we end up with 104. So you can see, again, we get the 104 with the 104. Just as we did 600 here, and 129 and 129. Again, like in the other exercise, you may recall, there's a few cents off. It can certainly be that way because these aren't exact numbers, but again, you're going to be very close. And because you're predicting out the average, when you find out if you need to add added cash, it's not going to be a large amount. The average covers most of it, but keep in mind that $104 will be used for the next year's cycle. Even though you have added cash up front, the beauty is you don't have to reestablish it in the next year. This $104 will now be right up here as it was last January. And that way, again, we have a consistent number, we have a consistent cash flow, and the bills are covered. Again, this is just a way to say, hey, I know I have predictions here, I'm trying to keep consistency, but again, this lets you have a bird's eye view and keep an eye on things. So again, the value of this is undeniable, and this is a great way to have, again, consistency and understanding of your money. One last thing that I want to go through here are utility budget plans. You may have these with your company, pretty common, but if you don't, what they're saying is they're really performing the exercise that we just have completed, where they take the prior year's total, they divide it by 12, and they charge back the amount for the next 12 months. So they come up with that number and they just take it out. So they will make an adjustment over that period if they find out that the bills have gone up higher or / lower. Usually it's higher, usually you don't see them lower, but it can happen. And so this is up to you if this is what you want to do, and it's certainly something that has consistency to it. And I tend to do it myself because everything else in the budget I've done myself with my own plan, so I'd rather have my own predictability rather than them tell me. So again, it's a good way to do it yourself, which means if you see spikes in your bill, you'll know that the amounts are coming. You know you might fall short of your predicted plan, so you can foresee that and make adjustments to this schedule in here, and then have that money set aside. So maybe your monthly goes up to 55 or 60 or 70 or something, but you know that's there. And by making that adjustment, you will make sure that at the end of that billing cycle, the gas company doesn't come back and charge you with a lump sum, right? What if they come back and said, here, well, you have $150 or $250 because the bills were higher than what we predicted from your average. So, okay, that will finish off this section. And I hope you're starting to see the value which we've seen now in bowling and childcare and gas bills or utility bills here. So this is now getting this to that finite pattern of creating consistency, consistent amount of bills, getting to the fixed bill amounts. So again, we have full control over our budgets. So thank you for joining, and we will see you in the next video.